Title: They thought this creature was a myth until it was caught. The giant squid. For centuries, the ocean kept a secret it shared only with the terrified. Sailors swore they had seen it rise like a living island, arms unfurling through the breakers, eyes glinting like moons. Men came home with slashed hulls and stories no one wanted to believe. Maps drew monsters in the margins. Scientists shrugged. Tall tales, they said, exaggerations, born in the fog of fear and whiskey. And yet, beneath the ship-scarred skin of the sea, something enormous moved where light could not follow. To understand why the legend wouldn't die, you have to descend, far below the green ceiling where sunlight dances, down past the twilight where blue fades to bruised purple, into the midnight zone. At 600, 800, 1,000 meters, the world becomes a press of cold and silence. Pressure stacks upon pressure until it would flatten a steel drum. There is no dawn here, only the brief flicker of living lights. This is where sound travels faster, shapes travel slower, and eyes must grow impossibly wide to catch what little glimmers there are. If anything vast and secret still thrives on this planet, it thrives here. The first hard clues didn't come from cameras or courageous divers, but from the greatest predator of the deep, the sperm whale. Whalers cut into those leviathans and found beaks by the dozen in their stomachs, hooked and hard as obsidian, proof they had been dining on giants. The whales themselves wore their enemies like tattoos, rings of puckered scars dotting colossal heads, each mark a reminder of suckers lined with serrated teeth. Though no one had yet watched a giant squid alive, the victims of their battles were drifting to the surface, scarred and victorious, telling an unignorable story. Sometimes the sea offered a corpse. Violent storms heaved ashore bleached ropes of flesh in Newfoundland, Spain, Tasmania. Masses so large they became local legends long before a scientist could arrive with measuring tape. But the ocean is a master of sleight of hand. Its dead are swollen with gases, shredded by waves, gnawed by scavengers, half-melted by bacteria. What lay on the beach could be the giant itself, or a rotting whale tendon, or a misinterpreted blob of fat. The arguments were as murky as the water that delivered the evidence. Then, in 1861, off Tenerife, the French corvette Alecton met the myth. A shape bobbed in the swell, pale, glistening, immense. Harpoons whistled, lines went taut. The crew shouted as arms thrashed and lashed, as a hole bloomed in the sea and closed again. But harpoons tore free of jelly-soft flesh. Cannon fire did nothing but churned water into foam. The beast slid under, escaping into legend once more, and the pieces of tissue they scooped up disintegrated in the sun. The Kraken existed only as panic and pulp. A dozen years later, the tide changed. In 1873, a fisherman near Newfoundland hauled up something he didn't dare keep to himself. 10 arms, a body like a pail barrel, the whole mass heavy and stubborn as a drowned man. A local minister and amateur naturalist named Moses Harvey bought it and did what anyone would do in the face of history. He draped the creature across his bathtub. That photograph, skin slack with death, the mind reeling at the scale of those arms, traveled the world. Newspapers gasped. Drawings fevered the public imagination. In labs from Copenhagen to London, men with Latin on their tongues named the beast Architeuthis, the ruling squid, and added it to the ledger of the known. Yet alive it remained invisible, a rumor pinned to a porcelain tub. The scientific age pushed deeper. Steel spheres descended by cable. Submarines exhaled bubbles into blackness. Nets trawled the deep scattering layer and sometimes hauled up a tentacle like a pale rope studded with ringed teeth. Samples found ammonia in the flesh, nature's antifreeze and ballast, keeping this invertebrate neutrally buoyant, its body tasting of cleaning fluid to a human tongue. The eye, when intact, was the size of a dinner plate, the largest in the animal world, tuned to catch the faint silhouette of a whale lunging from below. Everything about the creature's design whispered a life lived in the absence of sun and the presence of danger. And still, no one watched it move. Why? Because the deep rewards patience and punishes spectacle. Bright submersible lights scream across the water column. Thrusters drum. In a realm where a pinprick of bioluminescence is a lighthouse, a bathysphere is a thunderstorm. If a giant squid hunted by stealth at the edge of blackness, any human intrusion would send it slipping into stillness. Again and again, expeditions returned with silence and an empty reel. On an unassuming dock in Japan, a marine biologist named Tsunemi Kubodera wondered if we had been asking the wrong thing. Rather than chase the giant, why not bring the giant to us? Fishermen in the Ogasawara Islands spoke in careful tones about lines that came up mangled, about nights when the sea itself seemed to breathe. They knew where sperm whales congregated, where currents braided plankton with krill, and krill with squid. Kubodera listened, watched their hands, and began to design a trap not to capture a body, but a moment. He set his camera not on a roaring sub, but on a line. Quiet, patient, nearly invisible. The bait had to speak squid, not human. A smaller squid with its flesh exposed, the promise of a free meal. Hooks, yes, but not to ensnare the giant wholesale, just enough to hold its strike long enough for a shutter to blink. The camera stared downward into the dark, its light dim, tuned to red, a color that disappears quickly underwater. The team released the rig into the blue, into the place where fear and curiosity meet. Days pass. The ocean did what it always does with hope. It swallowed it. The line returned with tooth marks, but no sighting. The camera registered shadows and plankton snow, an opera of the minute. Then, on a morning that looked like any other, the line trembled like a living thing. Out beyond the boat's wake, something tested, twisted, pulled. The reel spun. Hands moved with the speed born of long preparation. When they brought up the rig, they realized what had happened. On the camera's tiny screen, there it was, glimpses, frames, the suggestion of an eye looking back. Then, unmistakable, an arm studded with suckers, curling with a serpent's deliberation. The flash of white from the inside of a tentacle club as it struck. The animal had seized the bait, wrenched free, and left behind a trophy. A 3-foot length of tentacle, severed in the struggle, slick as cordage. The world took notice. For the first time, a living giant squid had been photographed in its own dark kingdom. News anchors practiced the word architeuthis as if it were a spell. The severed arm went under the microscope, DNA confirming what the heart wanted to believe. Yet in every interview, one dissatisfaction persisted. Photographs were miracles, yes, but they were slivers. Could we watch the giant move? Could we witness not the strike itself, but the animal, its intent, its bearing, the economy of its grace? 2 years later, Kubodera returned to the same waters with a plan that balanced audacity with restraint. The boat would be small. The bait would descend at a depth where giants patrol, nearer the surface than their daytime haunts, when the outermost tendrils of Naut still held the water. The camera would be ready. The team would not flood the scene with light. When the prey arrived, they would not thrash the sea into a froth of panic. They would let the giant reveal itself. What came up the line that day was not myth, not drawing, not an artifact draped over porcelain. It was a living female, shimmering silver and rose, 7 meters from the tip of her tentacles to the end of her mantle. She did not explode into the combat many had imagined. She tested, tightened, and when steel bit, she turned power into poetry. Down the line traveled a blow, a hiss in the water. With every meter hauled, the squid fought with a logic that had outlived empires and eras. Pull, pause, assess, pull again. Cameras rolled. Minutes stacked into an hour. The surface grew near. The water brightened from slate to smoke to gray. And then, for the first time in the history of our species, the giant rose into daylight. You can't rehearse your reaction to seeing a legend breathe. The mantle flexed like a bellows, arms braided, unbraided. The eye, round, fathomless, assessing, turned, tracked, dismissed, returned. She flashed white, a startle pattern like a shout in a silent room. The team filmed and filmed, their voices caught between laughter and awe. No artist's pen had gotten it right. No story had captured the economy of this engine, the way muscle and nerve and ancient behavior merged into a swimmer that seemed less to fight water than to become it. Even then, the sea kept a few secrets back. The squid tired. The line slackened. For a moment, it seemed as if the creature might surrender to gravity, to human hands, to the age-old desire to weigh and measure and pin to a number. But the ocean is not a museum, and its giants are not exhibits. With a final contraction, a whip of arms, she slipped free, leaving the boat to rock on the wake of her vanishing. She returned to the column of blue, and soon afterward the first clear video of a giant squid lifted from those waters and broke across the world. If that had been the end, it would have been enough. But in 2012, in an experiment that could only have happened after 100 failures, the deep yielded a more intimate encounter. A team working with Japanese broadcaster NHK and Discovery, armed with a new kind of patience, sank a camera that didn't act like a camera at all. Edith Witter, an oceanographer who thinks like a squid, engineered a bioluminescent lure, a ring of blue light that mimicked the distress signal of a jellyfish, the same kind of glow that echoes a predator's approach. The camera looked with red light, invisible in that world, and listened more than it shouted. It waited in the darkness for a hunter whose eyes could catch the smallest betrayal. This time, there was no line to tug upon. No hooks, no entanglement, just an imitation of panic and a promise of prey. Minutes dripped, hours passed, and then the water rearranged itself. Out of the black rose a shape so crisp it made you forget the depth. So sudden it made you forget to breathe. Arms articulated into purposeful whips. The club unfurled. The beak struck. The camera did not blink in panic. It watched with the composure of a machine built by longing. The giant hung there, a blade in the sheath of its own skin, then drifted away into the long corridor of night. Soon after, at the surface, in open water under a hot sun, another camera caught the same animal silvering just beneath the glare, her skin shifting from pewter to pearl as if she were made of moonlight. For the first time, humanity looked into the arena where myths are born and saw not a monster, but an animal doing exactly what evolution had honed it to do: stalk, test, strike, vanish. The casualty of the legend wasn't wonder, it was ignorance. The giant squid turned from a cautionary tale into a question we could finally refine. How fast do they grow? How long do they live? Are they solitary phantoms or shadows that travel in loose, shifting societies? What does it mean to be both hunter and hunted in a world of darkness where every piece of light is a conversation? We gave the kraken a Latin name, then we gave it motion, and still our understanding feels like the first tentative steps onto a coastline the size of a planet. In the Southern Ocean, a cousin swims, the colossal squid, broader, heavier, its hooks swiveling on rings like something imagined by a blacksmith. In trenches we have not yet mapped, other eyes must be watching, other muscles flexing. Every time we lower a quiet lens into the dark now, we do so knowing that the sea will always hold more secrets than we have time to ask. When the sailors spoke of monsters, they were wrong about one thing. The giant was never risen from rage or malice. It emerged from hunger, from stealth, from a body threaded perfectly to a hostile world. It lives where fear lives, at the edge of what we know. And now that we've finally seen it, the only question that matters is the one that kept those sailors pointing their lanterns over the rail, straining for a glimpse that might rewrite the night. What else is out there, just beyond the nearest circle of light, waiting to be caught not by hooks or harpoons, but by our willingness to look long enough?